So I've been in water a long time. I don't want to spend too much time talking about me, but I'm going to talk about some areas of what we've gone through as the North Cedar Improvement District. Libby has provided us many requirements mandated by Island Health for a water system to provide safe potable drinking water. But there are other authorities and legislation that small systems must adhere to. Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources, and Rural Development is responsible for Water Sustainablity Act, and they are in charge of licensing water rights for surface and groundwater, which the North Cedar Improvement District is going through right now. We have applied for a license a year ago for our existing groundwater wells, which are under the influence of surface water. And I'm looking at applying for another license for a well that we are going to be drilling as part of our new water treatment plant on our property that we have just purchased. Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is a new one. It used to be, it just changed again. I can never remember all their names. But they are responsible for tax assessment, collecting and distributing tax funding, approving and recording bylaws, and grant funding where and when available, and building and safety standards, which are all part of things that we have to look at when we're building a treatment plant or when you're running a water system. Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure is responsible for highway and infrastructure projects and subdivision approvals that we're all deal with when we're working with our water systems. They're also responsible for our right-of-ways and easements that we have to register. And then we have to also deal with regional districts. I think almost everybody here has to deal with the regional districts. They have building bylaws, subdivision official community planning that we have to adhere to. Grant funding, gas fund distribution. So they're the ones, if you're a small system, you can ask for funding through your regional district and they will decide. And the most important one is the Ministry of Health. They provide all our operating permits that water systems must adhere to and work within, enforce the Drinking Water Protection Act, and approve all water construction projects. And this is something I live by. I've lived by this ever since I've been in water. The drinking water officer is our police force and our best advocate. I'm going to go to a little bit of theory here so you guys know where we came from. So the North Cedar Improvement District has been around since 1959. And we have 1,355 water connections, 5,000 residents. Since 1991, the Ministry of Health has had restrictions on our permit to operate. We've always had restrictions since 1991. Since 2009, North Cedar Improvement District had shortfalls in meeting the requirements of its permits. Island Health made it a requirement to improve and secure a source of water. Fire Underwriter Survey at the same time made the North Cedar Improvement District aware it did not meet current demands for fire suppression. By 2014, Island Health required the North Cedar Improvement District to complete a source to tap water study to identify all shortcomings. The water study identified that the North Cedar Improvement District water source was highly susceptible to contamination and turbidity, and that current treatment was not enough to meet Island Health requirements. Our NTUs in our water is 0.001. We have the cleanest water around. Our well, number 6 well site is 3 meters from the riverbank, and right now it's probably underwater. In September when I went down there, there was a foot of water. I couldn't get my knees wet. Now it's probably 4 meters above my head. And if you guys drove across the river, you see how high the water is. And our well site there is completely our 3 wells are completely underwater, except for the heads themselves. And wellhead number 6 has about 1.5 inches before it floods. And then our turbidity will go up to something like 17. And because of that, we have to do this treatment. So Island Health in 2014 required the NCID to design and build a treatment plant that would yield to a 43210 4-log treatment of well water under the influence of surface water. The problem is that the North Cedar Improvement District did not take the requirements of Island Health as seriously as required and continually looked at other sources and other forms of treatment to the great dismay of Island Health. So in my first month here, I had to take control with the help of our lawyer and Island Health drinking water officer. I was able to get the board to understand that if they didn't meet the requirements of Island Health, they would lose their permit to operate and have Island Health order to comply. And that order to comply could mean many things. Island Health is the police, but they are really there to ensure the public receives safe, potable drinking water. That is their number one job. They don't want to impose fines, they don't want to take over our water system, but they will do anything they have to make sure our residents get safe drinking water. Consequences of receiving an order from Island Health could have led to fines, or more likely, from my conversation with the drinking water officer, hiring a contractor to construct the required treatment plant at any cost and have the bill paid by the North Cedar Improvement District. This is how serious they were. With a great deal of collaboration from our lawyer, engineer, Island Health, drinking water officer, and some of our solid trustees, we have been able to avoid any Island Health consequences and are moving towards building our treatment plant, although 1 year has passed for our required completion date. So what we have now is, a couple months ago, I got a preliminary engineering plan made to build a water treatment plant for under $3 million that would meet all our requirements. A couple weeks ago, we moved to stage 2, which is final drawings and tender for our treatment plant. And then we have to have this built by January 31st next year. We have the land that we expropriated a year ago. We've started development on it. And once we get through the rezoning, which I figured would take a couple of weeks, they tell me it's going to take 12 months. Once we get through the rezoning, we should be able to build in this construction in a month or two. And then we'd have our treatment plant, we'd be able to remove our moratorium on construction because we'd have enough water, because we'd be treating our wells at full capacity. We could build another reservoir or another well, which would increase our capacity for our total, which would be 10,000 people. That the estimate would be around 2036 of 10,000 people and I think 2,500 connections. Well, let's talk about sustainability. North Cedar Improvement District, our water and fire and street lighting, our whole system is sustainable because we charge rates that we have a sinking fund that we put in, I think $280,000 a year for amortization for other things. And these are things that you have to look at when you want to be sustainable. And I think most of the systems here aren't really small systems. I was in Powell River a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of the systems are very small, between 20 and 100 and some. Those people are not sustainable at all, and part of the reason is they're trying to keep their rates low, but those systems will ultimately disappear because they are not sustainable. And being from there, I know what the government has told me: if you're not sustainable and you can't make a sustainable asset management plan and show us that you're sustainable, we will not give you funding. And there is no reason to give you funding because you're not spending your money properly. So instead of charging people 25 cents or 7 cents a cubic meter of water, charge them $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $11, $12, $20, $25, $50 a cubic meter and make it sustainable. You know, that upgrade your water system, and this will give you lifelong water as long as the system's around. And a lot of people just have that hard problem. I mean, I worked for EPCOR. I don't agree with private water, but they did a great job in Edmonton. I look at water around the world, you know, costing places. There are places that spend $12 to $25 a cubic meter for water, but they drink it and they consume it. They don't use it for flushing their toilets or watering their car and things like that. So we have to look at water responsibly, and that's our job. So I always sit there when we talk about here, the directors don't want to put this guy on and don't want that on. The more people you have on your water system, the more sustainable you are. It's when you're down to, like, they have different rules for smaller ones, but when you're below 100, you're struggling. You're struggling, and it's very tough, and it's hard to attract professional people to do things. And it's hard to go to your members and say you need more money. But the thing is, unless you have those numbers, you're not sustainable. One of the things you have to look at is amalgamation. And the wrong way to amalgamate is what Ontario did in 1995, where they forced everybody to become, they reduced it from, I think it was 4,000 down to 800 or 900 regional districts, or not regional districts, but municipalities. And they forced everybody to get along and reduce their costs. What happens is costs went through the roof, things multiplied by 4, 5, 10 times, and it didn't work. But proper amalgamation, where systems get together, like I just talked about, where our water system and another water system get together and share resources like an operator or financial expertise, or go for grant funding together, that type of amalgamation works. It just takes a lot of planning and a lot of thought. The Coastal Water Suppliers group here, we're trying to take over from, what's her name now? That was Rosemary Smart, and help get the financing back so that small systems can apply for funding directly from the ministry. And I think it will happen eventually, because the system they have now is not working at all, where you have to go through the RDs. And as long as you're sustainable and you have a sustainable asset management plan, which is something I always push and I'm always talking about, is you could prove that you're sustainable, they will give you funding. If you cannot prove you're sustainable, they're not going to throw away money on you just because you have your hand out. And that's what people have to get out. If you're not sustainable, make yourself sustainable. It's not that hard. It's some work, but it can be done.